Locally, a baby is born with NAS, Neonatal Abstinence Syndrome, every 15 minutes. That's 36,000 babies a year. That's greater than the population of Puyallup. After months of receiving opioids in utero, these babies suffer through excruciating pain to shed an addiction they had no say in forming. That's why the Board of Health declared an opioid epidemic in Thurston County. I'm Commissioner John Hutchings, and today I'm going to spend time with health professionals who care for the most innocent and vulnerable victims in our opioid crisis, the newborns who come into this world battling NAS. Welcome back. Next, I'll be speaking with Liz Davis and Gretchen Toller from Public Health and Social Service to learn more about the opioid crisis in Thurston County, its victims, and ways we can address it. So Liz or Gretchen, which one of you has the best information on the statistics that are local to Thurston County?
I'll give you some statistics about what opioid addiction looks like in terms of babies and moms in Thurston County. For every 1,000 births that occur, about 6 to 9 are babies who are born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. And what that means is that a baby abruptly goes into withdrawal from drugs that the mother used during pregnancy.
6 to 9 out of 1,000.
Yep.
That's Washington State or Thurston County?
That's Thurston County.
Thurston County. 6 to 9 births out of 1,000.
Yes. Also, when a mother is using opioids, about 86% of pregnancies that happen are unplanned.
Can you tell us how a mom addicted to opioids, how that impacts the baby in utero?
Sure, I can. And so with neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is also referred to as NAS, we see breathing problems, seizures, feeding difficulties, and excessive high-pitched crying, and poor weight gain, just to name a few things. Some of the additional short-term and long-term effects of opioid use during pregnancy is miscarriage, preterm births, birth defects of the brain or the spinal cord, vision changes, changes to the baby's developing brain, which can affect their cognitive development. There can lead to behavioral disorders, aggression, and other things that we may not see till much later, until that baby is either preschool age or even school age and off to school.
Wow. And since after this segment we're going to be over at Providence St. Peter's Hospital talking with Kim over there and looking at the infants, and we imagine that's going to be very, very tough. But you both being leaders in public health and social services are dealing with this issue on a regular basis, but you also know that the Commission has declared a crisis, opioid crisis in Thurston County, and convened an opioid crisis task force as well. So you are the trained professionals in this field, so my question to you now is, what more can the Commission do, or what type of local public policy can we put into place that would help you, help our community, and overall help the babies and the moms and or dads?
In the opioid task force, one of the groups that we have is about pregnant and parenting mothers, and we know that in general, when we're talking about opioid addiction, in order to be helping people who are addicted to opioids, who may be moms, We know that medication-assisted treatment is key in order to be able to be in recovery for opioid addiction. The best science and best practices that we have now says that, you know, going cold turkey is not the way, that you need a combination of therapy and also medication to be able to help you through that process of being in recovery. So
Quite a bit different than quitting tobacco.
exactly.
I just heard a report last week. They talked about cold turkey is the best way to go. So this is completely different.
It's very different because of the effects on the body and the way that the body and the brain become addicted. And so having support for medication-assisted treatment in our community is very important. There will be a new clinic opening soon. And supporting insurance in being able to pay for that as a treatment for people who are addicted is helpful. Also, in terms of prescription drug monitoring, right now in Washington, the only kinds of overdoses that are reported are when people have overdosed on a medication that has been prescribed to them. And when we say overdose, we don't necessarily mean a death. We're talking about non-fatal overdoses. And something that we can do is to make opioid overdose a mandatory reportable condition, which means that any overdose that occurs, because a lot of times when people are overdosing, it's not on something that was prescribed to them. It may be a prescription medication, but it's not theirs, or they're using street drugs of some sort. So this would require that all opioid overdoses in Thurston County be reported to Public Health and Social Services so we could have better information on what's happening in our community.
Let me address that real quick, because that's powerful, that's big. It's mandatory reportability, or mandatory notification, whatever the legal term is. Right now we get notified of deaths, but we don't know how to address the problem. If we don't know how big the problem is, what's the problem statement? And so we need good data on how many people are overdosing. Now we get that information from law enforcement by and large, and in the jail when they're delivering naloxone to bring people back in so it doesn't become a fatal overdose. But there's many, potentially thousands or hundreds of others that we're not getting notified of. So it could be a bigger problem, or maybe not as big a problem as we think. So we need to get accurate data, is what I'm hearing.
And even currently, law enforcement doesn't have to report to Public Health and Social Services when an overdose occurs. They may be documenting it themselves, but that doesn't mean that the data always makes it back here. So there's not really any centralized space to be able to collect that data if you're talking about all different jurisdictions.
Oh. And so that data would be collected by the public health officer?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And we don't have that I know we don't have that currently,
We don't
but we're
have
looking
that
into that.
currently as a policy in our county. Another thing is you mentioned naloxone, and that is a drug that can be administered nasally by a layperson in addition to a medical professional. And what that does is immediately bring someone out of the overdose state. Usually it only takes one dose, and having that more readily available, it's not therapy, it's not the end-all be-all, because ultimately still we need to get that person to the hospital, we need to get that person help, but it definitely prevents fatal overdoses so that we're losing less lives, and that's hugely important.
With the county's needle exchange, are they delivering naloxone as well to folks, or no?
So Syringe Services does have naloxone on hand, and we're also trying to distribute it to others in the community. In talking with Olympia Police Department last week, we spoke about the fact that most of what they're seeing in terms of naloxone use and distribution is when someone overdoses, that a friend or someone that they're with administers that dose rather than someone who's a medical professional. But what should happen is that dose is administered, 911 is called, and then EMS can help as well.
And so the family that delivers it to a relative or a friend that would still be a requirement to notify the health officer, but I would, by and large, guess it wouldn't happen.
Well, hopefully, anytime that you administer naloxone, you should be calling 911, because that doesn't mean that the problem is fixed. They're
Right.
brought immediately out of the stage of being high or being an OD, and their fix is completely over at that point. The receptors in the brain are woken up really quickly, and so they're going to wake up cranky and not high, and they still need help. That doesn't mean that they're not in danger of cardiac arrest, but
Yeah.
you know, it's something that helps in that point in time. So it should always accompany a 911 call, and at that point we'd be able to collect that data.
And that is excellent, not only advice, because of the follow-up that is desperately needed, but also get it reported as well, so we know.
Yes, and to really save lives, naloxone always has to be accompanied by a 911 call.
Now, Gretchen, since you deal with so many other social services within the county, National Family Partnership and others, I would think most people have the perception of an opioid addicted baby, that the mother is I guess the perception is that the mother's just an addict out on the street, homeless. Can you dispel that for me, please, or for all of us?
Yes, addiction, it is in every aspect, I mean, across the board with people. So, I mean, we see it in professionals, we see it with people that maybe are struggling in many other ways, but it doesn't, there isn't a population that it doesn't affect. It
Right.
is reaching everybody. And it's important to make sure that we recognize that everybody needs support and resources, and to have those the screenings take place.
Great. Okay. I want everybody watching this program to understand that it's the professionals that have they're in the workplace and they have insurance and such, and many people don't know outside that relationship or outside that individual what kind of issue that person's dealing with. But it impacts so many others, especially down the road. And I've done the math, and quickly in my head, and the 6 out of 9 births out of 1,000 in Thurston County, I haven't done really the math, that is a huge amount. And I thought it was like the size of Puyallup, or was that the state?
Over a year.
Over a year's period, the size of Puyallup, that population. So we're actually dealing with a generation, year after year after year, a generation that we're raising that are born addicted to opioids. Mm-hmm. Terribly sad and scary. That's our future. Let me ask you a final question, and the question is, what else can you add to this topic, to this discussion for the people watching this at home?
I think touching on the policies again and what we're doing in Thurston County, I think there's a couple areas that are really important to touch on. The partnerships with our healthcare providers is critical to make sure that we're all at the table together to address this in partnership. That way we know that when moms are going in for prenatal care, that those screenings are taking place with their physician or their midwife, and that they're linking them to resources or treatment that can help. The other thing is the partnership with the hospital is important, making sure that they are taking steps, that there's research to show that for a family to be able to room in and providing a different approach to these babies that might be experiencing NAS will actually shorten the amount of time that they're in the hospital, and it reduces the need for the morphine that sometimes is used for babies going through withdrawals. And then the last one would be the ongoing support from the commissioners around programs in our community that work with families to support them. So there's Nurse Family Partnership and Children with Special Health Care Needs are two of the programs we have here at Public Health, and both programs provide support resources, linkages for families that might be experiencing some crisis, whether it be addiction or mental health or isolation or other things that are affecting their parenting. And it also provides the ability to screen these children early on. So we do developmental screenings, and that's going to be key to catching maybe some of the effects of the opioid use during pregnancy that we'll see later on. So if we can catch those, some of those cognitive delays early on and link those families with resources, it's going to help those children succeed once they get to school.
And it doesn't mean they'll never have issues again through school, behavioral or cognitive.
Right.
Liz, any final thoughts?
So also, in addition to the programs that are provided by Public Health and Social Services, there are some great programs that are provided for adults and even mothers who are addicted by our local nonprofits. And it's important to support those as well, because not everything can be done by government, as we know. And we have some fantastic programs and fantastic nonprofits that are focused on kids and families here in our community. And they can reach some of the people that aren't always able to be reached here at Public Health. So supporting any and all programs that are directed at kids and families and helping mamas who are addicted are very much appreciated.
Well, thank you very much. I'm at the policy level, and you're a manager and director, and you're a manager, Gretchen. And so you're actually in the trenches doing the hard work that people don't see and know that's going on in the county. And I applaud you. I thank you very much. You're so desperately needed, and a whole lot more like you as well. Thank you for taking the time with me today. Appreciate it, to get this word out to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'm headed to the special care nursery at Providence St. Peter's Hospital to meet some of the nurses who care for the babies born with NAS in our community. Okay, so the first question is, we're talking about NAS. Would you explain, I don't know which one of you want to explain what NAS is.
NAS stands for Neonatal Abstinence Syndrome. So instead of calling a baby a drug baby or a drug-affected baby, we say that they are abstaining from a substance that the mother used while she was pregnant.
Okay, so it's a stigma to say they're drug babies.
Yes.
Or addicted babies, is that not accurate?
They're passively addicted. So
Passively
they're
addicted.
not
Okay.
actively using by their choice. They're passively addicted.
Okay.
Born addicted because of what mom used.
So there's FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, and this is neonatal abstinence syndrome.
Because
Okay.
they are suddenly absent from the substance.
Okay, got it, thank you. How many at St. Pete's, how many babies are treated in a year for NAS?
So roughly here in our unit, 13% of our admissions are treated. So currently, for statistics for this year, we're able to pull up through the end of September, and we have roughly almost 400 admissions, so 13% of those have been treated under the diagnosis of NAS.
Have we seen that number rise in recent years?
It depends on the time, actually. I mean, we have seen it rise and go down. It just depends. It ebbs and flows. But we have seen a decrease in our length of stay. So our average length of stay currently is about 6 days, where it used to be 11 days. So we're learning more about how to treat babies with NAS and what's best for them, and the most efficient way to get them home with family or foster care.
Okay, so I've learned two things already about the stigma, but also you don't call it NAS, you call it NAS.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sure.
So for the public that always hears acronyms and stuff, NAS, we know what that is.
Yes.
And we've been hearing the statistics about how many babies have NAS that are born in the state versus the Thurston County. And it's the size of the population in a year, the size of Puyallup, which is crazy. Because year after year after year, you're talking about generations. You're talking about an entire generation that needs some desperate help. How long is a baby here? You kind of touched on that, Kim. Here before they're transitioned out, where they're healthy enough to move on.
It depends on the baby. It depends on what substance mom has used, or if she's been in treatment or not.
Or
been
how
in treatment,
long.
or how
Well,
long. So we always have a baby. So we love the baby to stay with mom on mother baby if medically stable until mom's ready for discharge, where they're then moved in to special care nursery. And now our average, like I said, is about 6 days, but roughly day 4, if they're stable and not needing any medications, they can go home.
Okay, and then where do these babies transition to? Home or a foster home, or where?
It depends on the social circumstances. Some mothers have been in treatment. They've been going to all their appointments. They've been doing everything they need to. The state's already involved. They're already watching these parents, and they know that it's a safe place to send them home to. Other ones, maybe mom's home isn't the safest place to go, so then they will go into foster care. But the whole picture has to be looked at to see where's the safest place for this baby to go.
So Child Protective Services is involved in all of these cases?
Yes.
Every one of them?
Anytime
Okay.
a mom comes in and tests positive for any substance,
Good,
they are
okay.
automatically contacted.
So then baby goes back with mom at home if it's a safe environment, and then there's follow-up?
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, good.
And they do also try, if the baby can't go home with mom, to keep the baby with the family. So they try to find a family member that will take the baby in. Whether or not mom is willing to go get treatment or not is a separate subject, but they do try to keep the baby with family. Or if there have been siblings that have been removed, they'll try to place the baby with those siblings as well.
Right, and for years I worked in detectives in Olympia PD, working child crimes. And the goal of CPS is, in all cases they can, reunite the family, put the family unit back together. So that's good to hear that's done with supervision and follow-up.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So let me ask you this though, how do you ladies and or your staff, how do you protect yourself from compassion fatigue? How do you maintain your emotional intelligence and your I'm coming to work again today, it's another positive day. How do you safeguard yourself? First aid bandage.
I think that because we love our job, and these babies didn't have a choice, and even if that's the case, the whole family needs help, and I think that's what we're here for. That's why we do what we do. So I think that's what keeps us going. Definitely are some difficult times, but to see the baby get better, feed better, sleep better, I think that's what keeps us going. And do you have anything to add to that?
Well, there are times that we have to remove ourselves. Say, some of us work
Yeah.
3 12s in a row.
Yeah.
And so by day 3, maybe this specific family is just a little too emotionally exhausting for you. The whole situation is just getting to you. So we're really good at changing out. Okay, well, you've had them, so now let me take over. Let me care for them. Because sometimes you know that maybe you're not giving the most compassionate care anymore because you're at that point where you just can't deal with it. So we'll have somebody else step in that can be the compassionate person that they need to be for that specific family.
So is there, in my previous profession, whenever an officer was involved in some type of a fight for life or a critical incident, there was always a debriefing afterwards. Not debriefing, what could we have done better, but an emotional debriefing, stabilizing the emotions and such. Are you ever offered, or do you attend emotional type or critical incident debriefings at least once a year to kind of get yourself right? In some departments internationally, they mandate their officers every year go through, if they're dealing with child crimes, go through a critical incident debriefing to kind of stabilize the emotion and get back on track, or prevent from going
Yeah.
off track.
Not necessarily
We
for
don't.
this type of thing. We do have debriefings, but I think we do so much of this. I think we all do a pretty good job of gauging how we're each
Well, and
other's
we
doing.
debrief amongst ourselves
Exactly.
too.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
we're all familiar with the whole situation, so we can all talk
Yeah.
with each other about it and how things are going.
And the hospital itself has a team called Code Lavender, and that is care for the caregiver. So
There you go.
yeah, so if a caregiver has a particularly rough shift, experiences a traumatic shift, feels like that they just need a little more support than what they're getting in the front line, then we can call a Code Lavender, and it brings our spiritual care team in, brings our house supervisor in, provides resources for that caregiver so that, and sometimes it may be that it's mid-shift and they need to go home. Like they
Yeah,
need that
yeah.
break. And so the hospital does offer the Code Lavender for employees as well.
That's beautiful. Is that like through EAP or Employee Assistance Program?
Well, kind of. So they're referred to the Employee Assistant Program, but it's just
Oh, got it. So
yeah,
start with
it's
Code Lavender.
Code Lavender is just within Providence Hospital, and the managers, directors have been trained to lead. It's a different kind of debriefing. You know, it's an emotional debriefing versus a clinical debriefing, and they will provide them with a basket that has, you know, bath salts and chocolate and kind of care for them. And then also, like I said, spiritual care is involved, so they will follow up with them. And if they need more help, we can refer them to the EAP program. But
That's where law enforcement lacks. I didn't get bath salts or candy.
Oh,
yeah,
Spiritual care does round. They round daily.
Yes.
So I have to say they always touch base with us.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
And Kim, Tammy, Deb, you are trained professionals, and I know that myself and other members of the public would just collapse and melt. We wouldn't be able to handle it. So I stand in your shadow. Thank you very much for that. But let me ask you this, because I'm sure the public watching this is going to ask, what can I do to help? What can the public do to help?
I think
And even
that's-
talk about, Tammy, what they
yeah.
can't do. to
Right.
help.
I think the public wants to hear, we were talking earlier, they want to hear, oh, you know, send food, become a rocker. But I think it's a bigger picture than that. I think it's a more difficult solution, but everyone does, we're at a crisis in this nation right now. Like it's an epidemic, and we need to find out why, we need to get to the root of why people are addicted, why our numbers have just skyrocketed in the last 10 years. Why are people turning to addiction? So I think it's a big question to answer, but if somehow you can get involved, one of our doctors gave us the name of a local, Thurston Thrives is a group that people can get involved in, and the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. People are turning to addiction for a lot of reasons, including ACEs, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but adverse
I am.
childhood experiences, yes. And so however people can get involved in that, just to research that, get involved. We need to get to the root of the problem. There's not a Band-Aid anymore.
And you're right, it's a national epidemic. And correct,
It
I mean,
is.
it's the policy at the federal level is trickling down at least, and to include all the pharmaceuticals and stuff, and even statewide. But dealing with Thurston County, it's a Thurston County initiative, but it's a Thurston Thrives. We started that several years ago with different action teams. But the county several months ago declared an opioid epidemic in Thurston County. The county has also developed a task force, and there's ways that the public can get involved in our task force as well. We're looking at other policy changes we might be able to make, mandatory notification, those types of things, so we know how big the problem is. And there's several things that people can do at the local level. I'm glad you brought that up. But as for coming in and volunteering, we don't do that here.
Well, we're starting a cuddler program, but we're starting it small, so we're starting it with people that are already either employees or volunteers of the hospital, because it's such a vigorous process to get through. They have to go through background checks
a lot
and
of vetting.
everything. And we also have just moved to a new form of care called Eat, Sleep, Console. So
What's
we're
that called?
Eat, Sleep, Console.
Okay.
So we are encouraging our parents to be here 24/7 with these babies, so they can be the one doing the care. They can be the one consoling. They can be the one doing all the comforting. We want the parents to play that active role. We want to help with that bonding. We want them to see that they can be a good influence in their babies' lives, and we're just here to help them with that.
That's beautiful. Kim, Tammy, and Deb, again, thank you so much for taking this time and letting me come into your work environment and disrupt it for a bit. And again, I'm not kidding you. It's not just trite when I say this, but I do stand in your shadow. Thank you for all that you guys do and all our ends. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Thurston County Connection on Thurston Community Media. Today, we briefly looked at the opioid crisis in Thurston County from the perspective of the babies who are victims to it. To learn more about the opioid crisis, check out the county's opioid response task force. You can find the task force's meetings and locations on the county's master calendar at thurstoncountywa.gov/BOCC. To find ways to support Providence and Olympia, go to washington.gov/BOCC. county.providence.org/donate. For more programming like this, visit the county's YouTube channel or tune in to Comcast Channel 3.